Marry him and you'll be cut off. My parents said. 3 years later, they showed up with $40,000 in gifts when my sister couldn't have kids. Marry him and you'll be cut off. 3 years later, I was glowing with joy and life. And they came crawling back. I didn't need their apology, just closure. I'm 28, female, and 3 years ago, when I married Luke, 30, male, my family shunned me. Since then, we haven't spoken. Luke and I had been dating for 2 years before we decided to marry. My parents never loved him, therefore they were strongly opposed to embracing him as a member of the family, as their son-in-law. The rationale for this was rather shallow. It was because Luke did not come from the same background as us. Luke's father worked as a high school janitor, and his mother stayed at home to care for him and his 2 younger brothers. Money was always tight, and Luke was unable to attend college since he needed to begin working immediately after graduating from high school to support his family. When I met him, he was working as a warehouse worker at a nearby office complex. I'd regularly see him during my lunch breaks. After a month or two, I invited him out. I honestly didn't care what his work was or how much money he earned. He was attractive, and after a few dates, I knew he was the right guy for me. 6 months later, I introduced him to my parents. They were first pleased to see him, but as they learned more about his family and background, the less they liked him. They eventually began pressuring me to end my relationship with him since they did not believe we were a good match. Apparently, they sought to save me from heartbreak and informed me that the relationship would never work since we were too different. They predicted that the honeymoon phase would come to an end and that we would eventually part ways. I hail from a very wealthy business family. My grandparents founded an investing firm, which my parents now control. It's lucrative, and my parents have always been proud of their work, the money they make, where they come from, and the people they associate with. In short, they've always been quite snobby, but it has never rubbed off on me. In fact, whenever I saw them acting as if they were too wonderful for everyone else, it made me uncomfortable. I resolved at a young age that I did not want to be like that, and I believe I followed through on my decision. My parents hoped that both my sister and I would work for them and help them grow the business. But, honestly, working for my parents looked like a nightmare, so I began working elsewhere. I was already on thin ice because I had disappointed them by not joining the firm after graduation. I believe my decision to be with Luke was the final straw. So when we became engaged, they were outraged and offered me an ultimatum. I could either end the engagement and remain a member of the family, or they would disown me and make my sister the heir to their whole estate. To be honest, my sister was our parents' favorite child, and for good reason. She had earned it because, since I was a child, she had been exactly the type of person my parents had hoped to raise. Sophie, my sister, has always been exactly like my parents. She was likewise proud of our fortune, despite the fact that she had not contributed to its acquisition. She was just as snobby and arrogant, believing she was superior to everyone else just because our parents had a lot of money. Sophie is my younger sister, she's 2 years younger, so I tried to make her act more like me, or a normal person, to be honest, but it never really worked. I believe she was just too much like my parents to recognize that the way they interacted with others was wrong. Anyway, I used to get along with her when we were younger, but when she started high school, she became a bit of a bully, and we stopped having a good connection. It was also somewhat disgusting to be continuously informed that I needed to be more like my sister when it came to mingling with others. According to my parents, I had no standards. There was also the fact that she lived her life exactly as our parents expected her to. She earned a business degree and began working with our parents to move the firm forward. She was now the model child for the ideal daughter. My parents, and occasionally Sophie, had tried very hard to persuade me to break up with Luke while we were dating because they disagreed with our relationship. Unfortunately for them, they were unable to succeed, and we became engaged. After my parents handed me that ultimatum, it was a simple decision for me. I wasn't concerned about their inheritance at all. I just wanted to live a peaceful life with Luke, so I told them they could disown me and I would be fine with it. About 3 months before my wedding, my parents openly proclaimed to the family that they were disowning me for marrying someone who plainly loved me solely because I came from a wealthy family. They wanted to know how long our marriage would endure if I didn't have the money I did. So far, with no possibility of inheritance, they were convinced that Luke would abandon me as soon as he discovered I had been disowned, and that my sister would receive the entire estate. But, judging by the fact that Luke and I are currently expecting our first child together, I guess they were mistaken. I was quite sad after they disowned me. Despite everything, they were my family, and I cherished them. But I never spoke with them again. They did not reach out to me either. I continued to work in human resources, and Luke was promoted to warehouse manager shortly after we married. The role also included a considerable rise. So life has been rather comfortable, and we have been very happy together. We found out I was pregnant a few months earlier, and now it was time to complete our joyful little family. Since they discovered Luke and I were dating, my in-laws have treated me as if I were their own daughter, and they have never let me miss my own family. I was very satisfied with life, and there was no drama, until 2 weeks ago, when Sophie texted me to say that our parents could be coming to see me soon. And, in case you're wondering why she warned me, it's not because she had magically transformed into a better person. She just reached out because she was angry with our parents. Apparently, a year ago, they paired her up with a guy who happened to be the son of a very close friend. She decided to go out with him, give him a chance, and see where things went. Our parents always spoke favorably of his family, because, of course, they came from similar financial backgrounds. The guy was also fairly well off. He proposed to Sophie about a month ago, after they had been dating for about a year. She thought this would make the family happy, and she was also eager to settle down and have her own family. But before they could announce their engagement, the guy's parents urged that both of them undergo reproductive tests. They were hoping for a grandchild, and their son had previously been duped by another woman who had not stated that she had undergone a hysterectomy for medical reasons. They did not want to take the danger again. Sophie felt it was strange, but she agreed to do it because our parents wanted her to get it over with so they could announce their engagement. Unfortunately, they discovered she was sterile. They tested her a few more times just to be sure, but the findings were always the same. My parents went to her reproductive doctors, but they had no clear explanation for why this was happening to her. The guy eventually broke up with her since he did not want to go against his family's wishes. And the most lovely aspect of it all? My folks are currently blaming her for some reason. I don't even want to go into how messed up everything is. I was terrified when I read the text she sent, and by the end of the message, I was extremely angry. She said she was telling me all of this because she knew our parents would contact me soon. They had learned from a few of my cousins that I was expecting, and because they no longer had a chance of having grandkids from her, I was their only hope. After reading the message, I chatted with Luke. We determined that, regardless of what happened, we would not reunite with them. It was simply not worth it, and, after how they handled Sophie, I wanted nothing to do with them. My parents arrived at my door 3 days ago, just as Sophie had mentioned. When I opened it, they hugged me and said they had heard they were going to be grandparents. They wanted to move on from the past and start over. That's why they came to reconcile with me. They even brought gifts totaling about $40,000 that were still in the car. The mention of the gifts and their worth irritated me even more. I was only a few months into my pregnancy, so I wasn't showing, and I was wearing pretty loose clothes. So I told my parents that what they had heard about my becoming pregnant was not real. I also told them I had recently spoken with Sophie and understood exactly why they were there. So, even if it were true, I had no desire to reconcile with them. I'm my own person, not a baby-making machine. And if they simply wanted to reconnect because I was their only chance at having grandchildren, I didn't want that kind of relationship at all. I also informed them I knew what I was worth, and it was definitely more than $40,000. Before I shut the door, I was extremely satisfied. I don't believe I did anything wrong because, given how they treated both me and Sophie, I don't believe they deserve the opportunity to have the kind of family they desire. But then my father sent me a note, and now I'm kind of confused, which is why I'm here to ask for guidance on what to do. It's not a very long message, so I'll simply paste it here and let you make of it what you will. Dad's message: we came to visit you and make things right because we know you're pregnant. I know you had specifically told everyone not to tell us about it just yet, but everyone in the family agreed it was time to make things right with you, and so did we. You have no idea how sorry your mother and I felt about everything after you married. We had wanted to contact you several times, but every time we discussed you with the rest of the family, we discovered that you still disliked us. We waited for you to calm down before reaching out. I guess that was our mistake, not doing anything and waiting for things to cool down before apologizing. But I sincerely want to apologize to you for what we put you through. We also want to apologize to Luke because we were completely mistaken about him. It's just that we didn't want him to break your heart, and you're aware how frequent it is in our circles to discover that the person your child is seeing is a gold digger. So we simply wanted to save you from it. I suppose we went a little overboard and never truly gave Luke a fighting chance. We were just trying to protect you, but now I realize we didn't do it correctly. I wish I could have apologized to you a long time ago, and believe me, your mother and I will always be sorry for our actions. I can guarantee you that whatever Sophie said to you is not true. Certainly not all of it. Her ex did not dump her solely because she was sterile. There were plenty of other reasons she didn't disclose, such as her extreme anger issues and her insecurity around him. I bet she didn't tell you about it, but her ex later contacted us to let us know that they were the real reasons he left her, not simply the fertility troubles. Finally, I know you're worth far more than the presents we provided. We just wanted to express how sad we were, and still are, from the bottom of our hearts. I hope you see this and forgive us. So this is what they sent. And now I'm extremely perplexed. I'm desperate to discover the truth about everything, but I'm not sure whether it's really my responsibility anymore. I also feel like a jerk since I slammed the door on my parents when they tried to reconcile with me. And now I'm wondering whether I'm the asshole for ignoring my parents' attempts to make things right with me. Update 1. So I asked Luke about it, and he told me, like many others in the comments, that it doesn't really matter what the truth is at this time. It doesn't matter what the true reason for my sister's separation with her ex is, because my parents were only here because I was pregnant. If that hadn't been the case, they would never have contacted me again. And the fact that they had waited so long demonstrates that they assumed they could come and go as they pleased, and I was just going to have to deal with it. He explained that the message they sent me was an attempt to emotionally manipulate me, and that because I was pregnant, I may have been more vulnerable, which is why I fell for it. I agree with him there, because I've suddenly been more emotional about things. But Luke was able to identify numerous flaws in the message they sent me. For example, if they truly regretted how they had treated me, and particularly Luke, they should have contacted us at least once. Granted, I appeared upset with them, but how was not talking to them going to change that? They must have known that if they wanted to set things right, they needed to talk to us. They couldn't wait for us to relax on our own. That's not how it works. More importantly, they were aware that Luke and I kept our finances separate until we married. In truth, I had approached Luke, not the other way around. So, if he had been a gold digger, I'm very sure he would have approached me instead. For the first few months, they were understandably anxious about the contrasts between our families and financial backgrounds. They never tried to get along with Luke or get to know him. They acknowledged this truth in their message, but they never gave him an opportunity. But they didn't have the decency to apologize to him separately. It's not as if they didn't know his phone number or how to contact him. He was on social media, and they could have contacted him there if they were truly sorry. However, the way they acted and even phrased things made it clear that they were treating this extremely carelessly. So I have no reason to feel bad about what has happened. Talking with Luke about this has made me feel a lot better about my decision. I also decided not to contact Sophie. I'm not sure what her motives were, but one thing is certain, she didn't reach out to me out of the kindness of her heart. Some people in the comments complained that I was being too hard on Sophie because she had a bad experience recently and merely wanted to warn me. So I should probably refrain from saying such negative things about her because, in the end, she did me a favor by informing me that my parents would be visiting. That might be true. However, this does not invalidate her previous actions. She cut me off on the same day as my parents and never followed up with me again. Not to mention that I had previously discussed her personality in my original post. She had always been biased toward Luke because his background and actions were no better than my parents'. The only reason she told me about all of this was because she was upset with our parents. I'm very sure if things had worked out with the guy my parents had matched her up with, she wouldn't have contacted me, and everything would have stayed the same. So she did this to exact revenge on our parents, rather than to protect me. I understand she went through a terrible ordeal, and as a woman, I will always support her and maintain that the way her ex and our parents punished her for something she had no control over is wrong. But as her sister, I will never forgive her. And I really don't need to. I know that now. I haven't heard from my parents in a few days, and they haven't tried to contact me since that message. So I'm hoping they'll keep to that and not contact me after this. Because I genuinely do not want any more drama. I just want my pregnancy to be smooth and nice, and they will have to stay away. I'll decide whether or not to include them in my life after the baby is born. Because for now, my own happiness is my #1 priority. And it's not like my children will never know the affection of grandparents, uncles, and aunts. My in-laws, as well as Luke's brothers, have made an effort to check in on me every other weekend, whether by phone or in person. It warms my heart to see how tight their family is, and how quickly they welcomed me into their family after discovering their son adored me, with no drama or complaints. I wish my family had done the same, but alas. Update 2. My parents paid me a visit 2 weeks ago to reconcile with me. But I made it plain that I did not want to speak with them right now. We hadn't spoken since then, with the exception of the text message they sent me. I didn't even respond to that. I assumed they would take the hint and realize that this was not the time to disturb me. But clearly, they couldn't just let this go. They decided to show up again, yesterday. Luke and I spent the evening at home because it was a Sunday. Someone knocked on the door unexpectedly, despite the fact that we were not expecting any visitors. When Luke looked outside, he noticed my parents were standing there. He inquired if I wanted to let them in or not, and, obviously, I said no. So Luke instructed them to leave, and I went to my bedroom since I didn't want to deal with it right now. I was fatigued and not in the mood. Instead of leaving me alone when Luke told them to, my parents remained at the door and argued with him. They got so loud that I had to come back out and personally tell them to leave. Even then, they continued to argue with me, insisting that they were only here to make things right with me and that I should give them a chance. They argued that they had raised me, therefore this was the absolute minimum I could do for them. I tried to explain that I would speak with them when I was less emotionally volatile, but now was not the time to worry me. They refused to listen. Instead, they emphasized why I should be grateful to them for the life they had given me, claiming that I was stealing the opportunity to be grandparents from them, all because of a stupid little lapse in judgment 3 years prior. They sounded very unhappy with me, which irritated me because they were in no position to make demands right now. And their stupid little lapse in judgment, as they phrased it, had caused a lot of sorrow and misery for me, so perhaps it wasn't as minor as they imagined. It was up to me to decide whether to forgive them now or in 5 years. They couldn't make me forgive them, and they needed to understand this. My sole error in the case was becoming very emotional and arguing with them, rather than simply contacting the cops and letting them handle it. Anyway, when I started debating with them, my mother burst into tears and accused me of being cold-hearted. She explained that she had already had to deal with the knowledge that Sophie would not be a mother, and now I was treating her this way despite everything she had gone through. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to express her feelings about how I was treating her. When my parents had put Sophie into a corner because she couldn't have children, she felt compelled to tell me about it, even though she hadn't spoken to me in years. After that, I simply snapped. I informed my parents that in order to be good grandparents, they first had to be decent parents, which they had failed badly at. First, they had wrecked their connection with me simply because they couldn't understand my want to be with Luke. He wasn't a spoiled rich brat like most people in our circle. Instead, he was a trustworthy and diligent individual. Clearly, they were not the ideals they stood for. As if that wasn't awful enough, they had wrecked their relationship with Sophie, their golden child. She had done everything right her entire life to impress them, and still they could only see one thing: she was sterile. They had reduced her to just one condition and pushed her away, despite the fact that her entire life she had done nothing but attempt to make them happy. At least in my case, they had the justification that I had constantly gone against them, which made it extremely easy to cut me off. But there was no justification for them to be so nasty to Sophie, especially at a time when they should have been supporting her. They had failed both of us. And they had no right to claim a place in our life. I'm not sure about Sophie, but I wasn't going to forgive them anytime soon. If they were truly remorseful for what they had done, they would have left me alone and realized that I was not in the correct mental state to cope with them right now. Instead of simply dealing with their punishment, not talking to me until I was ready, they decided to impose their presence on us and expect me to be fine with it. I was not pleased with it, and I told them so. Even after everything I said, if they didn't leave me alone, I'd have to call the cops, which would not look good for them. They only departed after that, and I was quite distraught for hours afterwards. I shouldn't have come out of my room to talk to them, but I'm glad I was able to get everything off my chest. I needed to express these things aloud. I needed them to hear it so they understood how horribly they had failed both of their children. And now that it's out there, I feel a lot lighter. Of course, I regret spending my evening fighting with them. It was a complete waste of time. But at least something positive came out of it. Update 3. Hello folks. So, almost 3 months have passed since my last report, and I'm well into my pregnancy now. I'm clearly showing, and my baby will arrive in 2 to 3 months, hopefully. Not much has changed since the last time I posted here. Part of the reason I was so idle was that I didn't have much to say. After our last dispute, my parents finally honored my wishes and did not contact me again. And no, I haven't maintained in touch with Sophie since, as I previously stated, we no longer have a relationship. According to my relatives, she resigned her job and no longer works for our family business. So it's quite sad, but I don't think my parents will be able to fulfill their ambition of having their daughters carry on their company's legacy, unless I change my mind later. I'm providing this update now since my parents' lawyer called me a few days ago. The final time the guy contacted me, he told me that my parents had formally disowned me and that I would not receive any inheritance from them. This time, he had the opposite news for me. He informed me that my parents had decided to re-establish my inheritance by changing their will to include me. Again, I'm not sure whether this is an attempt to placate me before the kid arrives, but it hasn't eased my feelings toward them thus far. However, if I were to look at the future, I would absolutely prefer to take over my parents' business after they retire. And having Luke run with me would provide poetic justice. I haven't given it much thought yet, but I plan to inform my parents when my kid is born that if they agree to let me take over the firm and sign the papers, I may consider allowing them to have a relationship with their grandson. I know that seems selfish, but I believe Luke and I have worked hard enough, and we deserve it. It will also demonstrate to us just how remorseful my parents are. And if Sophie wants to work with us, I'm not against it. However, for the time being, this is only a plan, and none of it has been put into action. Luke agrees with the concept, and will think about it when the kid is born.